If we want to get our music sounding the best it possibly can, we as producers and artists have to tackle thousands of stages, both big and small, throughout production, recording, mix and master stages. You know, it's rather daunting when you think of the whole music production workflow like that. But luckily, the final stage, being the process that makes our mixes sound louder with peak limiting, is mercifully one of the more simpler ones to get right. However, as easy as limiting appears on the surface, it can easily be overdone. So let's talk about what a peak limiter is, when you should reach for one, and how to use the controls to get your mixes and masters loud and proud. Now, Waves offer a range of fantastic limiters, from the world's first peak limiter plugin, the L1 Ultra Maximizer, through to the ever so clean and transparent sounding L2, Surgical L3 Multi Maximizer, and more. Whatever style of limiter plugin you need, we've got you covered. I'll break down the key differences between these plugins later in the video to help those of you out there who are looking for a high quality, budget friendly limiter pick the right one for your music. So let's get started. When should we use a peak limiter? As I mentioned a moment ago, peak limiters are typically used in the final stage of production, being mastering. But that's not to say limiters can't be used in areas of a mix. Many producers do indeed use limiters here and there to help them control busy submixes, bring more upfront focus to lead vocals, and give better density to bass parts, to name a few. But in a mastering workflow, a peak limiter, and only one, must be inserted as the last plugin in your chain. Why? Because limiters make audio louder, which is great, that's what we want, right? But making a track louder through a limiter can easily overdrive any plugin that follows. That's not what we want. There are, however, two exceptions to this rule. Dedicated metering plugins, such as Waves WLM, and headphone monitoring tools, such as the plugins in our ever-expanding NX range. So it's perfectly fine to put these sorts of plugins after a limiter. So what is a peak limiter? Essentially, these are super fast compressors set with a high ratio of at least 20:1. This is what prevents or limits the loudest parts of audio from going past a specific point, hence the name. Now, there are plenty of different limiters you can choose from to get your mixes louder, each with their own sound. Waves L1 is a hugely popular plugin known for having a certain bite and crunch in its sound when pushed hard. L2 has a cleaner sound, being a more forgiving limiter of the two. But if you need a more surgical approach when limiting, L3 with its multiband functionality lets you target specific frequency ranges, which is great for getting mixes super loud with super precision if necessary. Now that you have a better idea of how Waves' most popular limiter plugins differ, you can now pick the plugin most appropriate for whatever mix that you're working on. And in a couple of minutes, we'll compare how these sound. But before that, let's talk about how to use a limiter. Let's start with the ceiling, also referred to as the output or out ceiling. As a rule of thumb, you'll want to set this around -0.3 to -0.5. Why? With some peak limiters, there can be times when a tiny peak or two, known as intersample peaks, pass over this safety net ceiling when pushed hard with level, which can cause the occasional red line clip. Even if you use a limiter that doesn't let stray peaks past, these are known as brick wall limiters, it's still considered good housekeeping to have a small buffer set of around -0.3 at the output. Next, the threshold control. This is where the magic happens. Dial this down and any signal that goes over this will be limited, which instantly increases the overall level and loudness of your music. Now, when working with any Dynamics plugin, it's important to stay objective. Our ears are very keen to inform our brain and musical instincts that louder is better, which isn't always the case. Now, a nifty trick to easily hear what any limiter is introducing to the sound, without loudness tricking our better judgment, is to link both threshold and out ceiling controls together. You can either hold Shift on the keyboard and mouse click both faders to link the controls, or drag the small control between the two faders. By doing either one of these moves means as the loudness increases at the threshold, the output decreases, in essence gain matching the entire process, saving your judgment from being fooled into louder is better. you've got the sound that you want, making sure that the limiting isn't doing anything to the music, such as adding unwanted distortions, you can return the ceiling control to the safety net zone of around -0.3. Now, for most of you, these two limiter controls are all you'll ever need to get great sounding, loud mixes and masters. But if you want to go deeper, let's now talk about the release control. This will help you shape the response of your limiting and thus the attitude and vibe of your master.
Come here, but change my face. Come water, but don't meet my gaze. Come let go, a different name. Just give me a reflection I can blame.
Let's now talk about the last few controls you'll typically find in peak limiters: quantize and dither. In the not too distant past, we were all mostly working at 24-bit, delivering our masters pretty much exclusively for release on CD, which was a 16-bit format. Setting this accordingly to dither down from 24 to 16-bit was something that we did religiously, but not so much these days as streaming services encourage us to submit higher quality audio. So these days, unless you are exporting for release on CD, this collection of settings aren't really anything that you need to worry about. Let's now take a listen to L1, 2 and 3 back to back to give you an idea how each of these perform.
Come here, but change my face. Come water, but don't meet my gaze. Come let go, a different name. Just give me a reflection I can blame.
And there you have it, 3 peak limiter plugins that can get your mixes loud and proud with ease. Visit waves.com/limiters to learn more about the plugins that we've highlighted in this video. Until next time, I'm Dan from Waves, keep it creative, and I'll see you again soon.